Welcome to Pivotal People. Today we're going to be speaking to Professor Martin Green. Martin is the Chief Executive at Care England. Welcome, Martin. Welcome to Pivotal People. We're really happy to have you here and very interested to know a little bit more about you. And take you back to your childhood. What was it that inspired you?
Well, I was very lucky that I had a great childhood. I had great parents and a wonderful brother. We lived in Northumberland and it was very much off the beaten track, but it was a great place to grow up. I guess the answer to the question about what inspired me, it was usually people. It was my sort of contact with people right the way from being very small, people I met in the village, etc. And then, of course, when I went to school, I started to have influences of teachers, etc. So I guess I had a very good childhood and I look back on it with fondness. And then I was also quite lucky that I connected with some really interesting people.
Yeah, and I think it is all about people, isn't it? So you were telling me earlier about going to school and your headmaster. Tell me about him.
Well, he was really an inspirational person, and it's often a bit of an overused term. But I think our headmaster was a man called George Chapman. And one of the things about Mr. Chapman was he was head of a school that had a very, very long history. We were founded by Edward VI. It was a royal charter. And that was great, and we still had our traditions. But Mr. Chapman realised that we should be in the modern world as well. So we had the best of both worlds. And he really wanted people to have exposure to different things. So, for example, we had a television studio, and I have an O-level in modern communication because he felt that that was the next big thing that people would be engaged with.
He was probably right.
I was going to say how right he was. But we also had great opportunities with things like school trips. We also, it was a school that had good, solid academic background, but also it catered to people who weren't quite as academic. So we did things, there was a car maintenance workshop, there were lots of activities around, we had a ski slope, we had lots of PE and
you had a ski slope?
An artificial ski slope.
Wow.
Of course, I cannot ski to save my life,
Really?
but one of the excuses I always give is that if you ski on an artificial ski slope, it's very different when you get on to the snow. But at least we had that opportunity, and we were given lots of opportunities in that school.
Fantastic. What a great place to grow up.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So what happened following school? What did you do next?
Well, I guess I was in that space where I was looking to go to university, and I went to university in Newcastle. Now, originally, I was going to do theology because my A-levels had been sociology and theology and also history. And I got myself on a great theology course in Newcastle. And about 3 weeks before I was due to start, I got a letter asking me if I was going to take ancient Greek or Aramaic as my New Testament language. Well, of course, with my French being nearly non-existent, I had to have a major rethink about what I was going to do. So I was then faced with, do I do history or do I do sociology? And in the end, I decided to do sociology because I thought it was a broader subject.
Yes.
If truth be told, I thought it was an easier subject, though that didn't necessarily turn out to be true because I did a BSc and there was a lot of focus on research and how you could substantiate some of the theories within sociology. So it was a great course, but I have to say Newcastle is the most fantastic place to get, well, and particularly to go to university. And we spent our lives in those fabulous nightclubs. Julie's, Madison's, Chasen's, the Incognito, Tuxedo Junction, Tuxedo Princess. We were there pretty much, 5 nights a week.
That must have been an amazing experience being at university in Newcastle.
It really was. It's a great city to be a student in, and also the course was fun and interesting as well. So I really enjoyed my time at university. And then when I graduated, I then went to work for a charity called Gingerbread, which was a single parents charity. And they had some offices on the Westgate Road. And it was really interesting because I hadn't really had much contact either with single parents or indeed with some parts of the city that I had been living in for the last 4 years. And so I had a bit of a sort of awakening there about how different people's lives have different, they have different opportunities, and sometimes they have different challenges.
Yeah.
But it was a very interesting role. And then I went to work for the Newcastle City Council in their housing department. And again, that was great. It was a really difficult job. It was very complicated because of the way in which people went off one set of benefits into another, etc. We didn't have functioning computer systems, all that.
No,
and it was pressurised. But what was great, because of the pressure, all our colleagues, we all worked together so collaboratively, and we all supported each other. And I had some great friends as well as colleagues when I worked in that role. So that was another interesting role that I had in Newcastle.
Yeah, I think life experience and work experience is all really important to build us up to where we're going next. So from that role, where did you...
Well, I then had a lucky break. I saw an advert in The Guardian, and there was a time when on Wednesday in The Guardian were all the social care and social policy jobs.
Yeah.
And there was a job to be the head of housing policy at Age Concern Greenwich. And I looked at this and I thought that would be a really great role. And I rang up to get the application forms, and there were so many people phoning up that I actually got the chief executive herself, and we had a long conversation. She sent me the application, and I went for an interview, and she appointed me. And I think mainly because we sort of got on well, rather than any stellar performance I had in terms of my abilities. But again, that was a great role, and I had some fantastic experiences there, and I hadn't been there very long when the CEO left and I got promoted to be the CEO. So at a very young age, I was in a very important role, but I didn't really have much understanding about it. But I was so well supported by my colleagues and also by the chair at the time, who was a really fantastic woman. So I got a lot of experience there, and that's what led me into the Age Concern network. And then from Greenwich, I've been chief executive at Age Concern in Wandsworth and in Lambeth, and I was also a trustee of Age Concern England. What was great for me at Greenwich was one of the people who was so supportive to me was the then Dr. Sally Greencross, who was the Deputy Director General at Age Concern, who of course went on to be Baroness Sally Greencross, and she was the most wonderful supporter and friend to me over so many years. And you know, she was another truly inspirational person, and she was so kind and so generous to me in the way in which she supported me, gave me advice, engaged me in things that helped me in my career, but also exposed me to lots of great opportunities. So I really am indebted to her for all her support.
Yeah. And you end up with an OBE. Wow. That is something that, you know, it's difficult to achieve, and it's something to be extremely proud of. Tell me about the day. Tell me about what happened.
Yeah, well, we were very, very lucky when I had my investiture, because we got the Queen who did the investiture.
Yeah, very
and
lucky.
The whole day actually was a really enjoyable day, and I have to say the staff at Buckingham Palace were absolutely fantastic. They really made it a very special day, and they supported people, because we were all quite nervous, and particularly when we heard that the Queen was going to do the investiture, that made us more nervous. But one of the staff said something which was so brilliant and helped. They said, whatever you do wrong, don't worry. It might be your first investiture, but it certainly isn't the Queen's.
Very true, yes, I'm sure. Yeah.
This person said, whatever happens, Her Majesty will deal with it. And so that gave us a bit of sort of confidence that we couldn't put a foot wrong in a way. And in fact, the investiture went very well. The Queen asked very interesting questions, which I was not expecting her to, particularly about dementia, because I got my OBE for the work I did with David Cameron on the Dementia Challenge. So I thought it was amazing that not only was she doing an investiture, but she seemed to have an understanding of who was at the investiture and what they were there for.
So how many people were there at the time?
About 50. And I think, you know, she must have gone through briefing notes and just would probably have a trigger when the announcement was made as to what you were getting it for, but then that brought to her, because she knew about the strategy, for example, in my case. So I was in great awe of her ability to have a brain that would keep that information and be able to use it effectively.
Yeah. So what did she say to you?
Well, she asked me about the dementia strategy, and she asked me about the challenges of supporting people with dementia.
Fantastic, fantastic. So would you call that the highlight of your career?
Yeah, I think it's very much up there as one of the
sure.
highlights of my career. But to tell you the truth, there have been so many highlights.
Yeah.
You know, I've been so lucky in this career because I've had so many opportunities to do things and to engage with really interesting, different people. I've had loads of opportunities to go overseas as well as do things in the UK. So I feel like I've had a very happy and very enjoyable career.
Just one last question. So if I was to talk to that 12-year-old boy, or if you were to talk to that 12-year-old boy who's about to set off on his secondary school education, what piece of advice would you give him?
Take every opportunity.
Which you did.
Well, one of the things that I've never really done is plan a career. No. So I've just seen opportunities and thought, I will do that, see if I can do that. And the other piece of advice I would give is never put a barrier in your own way. So, for example, I once saw a job and 2 people said to me, how ridiculous that you should apply for that. And my mother said to me, just put in an application. You never know what the competition is like on the day. You might just find yourself shining and getting the job. And actually I did.
What was the job?
It was the age concern job.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, you know, I think the piece of advice is, you know, take opportunities, but also don't create your own barriers. There are enough barriers out there without you creating your own.
That's been absolutely inspirational. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.